right. Good morning, everyone. I am the other person in this room today that's taken a little extra time to graduate. So very happy to be here. And thank you for the faculty members who got me back into the program. So I am presenting on a student service oriented model for dispersing financial aid. And particularly this is going to be for community college students. And when I say disperse, what I mean is the actual giving out of financial aid awards. There is a problem. Too many community college students that are eligible for financial aid awards are not receiving them. My proposed solution is a student service model. There's a lot of definitions. Mine is one that is just removing as many administrative burdens for students to access financial aid while protecting the taxpayer. I'll be talking about an overview of where we are with the disbursement policy, my comparative analysis between what the academic literature says and what professionals say, and then my findings, recommendations, and goals. So first, this study came out a few years ago. It's what got me down this path. It found that over 20% of community college students who are eligible for Pell Grants did not receive them. They calculated that's about $130 million of taxpayer resources, federal resources that are left on the table every year. This is really bad. Our students desperately need these funds. And so hopefully this report will help our colleges better serve our students. So first, the current landscape. Colleges are responsible for financial aid fraud. They're stewards of taxpayer dollars. And if there are too many fraudulent financial aid applications, so financial aid dollars going to students who do not deserve them, colleges are on the hook for not only returning that money, but then also getting sanctioned by the Department of Education. So this provides an incentive for them to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars on one hand, but then also create barriers for students to access that financial aid. So it's this balance that we really need to strike. There is a changing landscape, however. The new funding formula for community colleges reward colleges for giving more funds out to low-income students. There's expectations by the state legislature and the governor on closing achievement gaps and increasing student success. And then finally, there's just a better understanding on the need to address basic needs like food and housing insecurity that relates back to academic success. So what I did is I took a look at what the academic researchers say on what's the best way to disperse financial aid. And then I also took a look at materials by the National Association of Financial Aid Administrators, otherwise known as NASFA. They are the the nationwide professional association that represents financial aid administrators, and they do a lot of professional development materials. I found 4 key areas where that we could impact better dispersing of financial aid: income verification, satisfactory academic progress policies, Pell and Cal Grant counseling, and data tracking and collection. It's okay if you don't understand these terms. I'm going to go into them in a moment. But just in general, I did find that researchers were pushing for colleges to be as flexible as possible for students, and the practitioners, or NASFA, also talked about flexibility, but also in the context of protecting the college from sanctions from the Department of Education, which I don't think is too much of a surprise, right? The practitioners really do need to think about protecting the college in addition to serving students. So first, income verification. The Department of Education requires colleges to audit roughly about 30% of their applicants to determine if they sent in a correct application. The researchers suggest that colleges should make this process as easy as possible for students, require students to submit as minimal amount of information as possible. While practitioners, on the other hand, we're talking about how yes, it should be flexible, but and simple as possible, but they should also keep aware that if their applications are deemed too fraudulent, if there's too many that are deemed too fraudulent, then the Department of Education could come in for sanctions. So my recommendation really does agree with the researchers, which is you should really only verify the minimum amount of students as possible, because that saves the college's money as well as the students. And then also very carefully consider what documents are required, but then at the same time, carefully track the rates of fraud that might be popping up so you could take corrective action earlier. Again, the goal is to protect the college from sanctions while at the same time make it as easy as students as possible to go through this process. satisfactory academic progress, or otherwise known as SAP. Colleges are required to demonstrate, or actually students are required to demonstrate that they're making satisfactory academic progress towards their degree in order to be eligible for financial aid. Researchers, again, wanted to have SAP standards as flexible as possible. Colleges, again, we're talking about that they need to be flexible, but then also make sure that they do not get out of compliance with Department of Education standards. My recommendation is that colleges should be flexible, but also more importantly, implement early warning systems in which colleges can identify students as early as possible that are in danger of losing their SAP so that they can get the services that they need. Pell and Cal Grant canceling. There are lifetime eligibility limits for both Pell and Cal Grants. Pell is the main system of financial aid on the federal level, Cal Grants at the state level. Community college students do not get out in general in the designated 2-year window that we generally think of when it comes to a community college career. So it's important to consider, when they use these grants, because they would probably want to use them when they transfer to a 4-year institution. Researchers were adamant that in general, colleges should recommend that students use their Pell and Cal Grants during their career at the community college. I do say that in general, that's very important because every student is different and there could be just different circumstances. Interestingly, the practitioners had nothing to say about Cal and Pell Grant counseling. And I say this is interesting because this over and over again was highlighted on a reason why eligible students do not utilize their Pell and Cal Grants at a community college. So, excuse me, my recommendation is that community colleges should set standards that in general recommends that students use their Pell and Cal Grants at an institution, but then they should also start investing in counselors to make sure that they consider each student's unique academic and financial situation. And finally, data tracking and collection. This is my own recommendation. This wasn't really in the literature that I reviewed, but I think over and over again, it just showed that in order to implement the previous 3 policies, we really need to track the data and various metrics on how our students are doing when it comes to financial aid, receiving, and then also success. This would do 2 things. 1, make sure our policies have the impact that they're intended. And then 2, provide an indicator of fraud to protect the college if necessary. So with that, I am done. Vice Chancellor O'Brien.
I'm wondering if your research turned up any specific examples of community colleges that are utilizing some or all of these practices or models close to this model that can be held up as a model for others.
Yes and no. And the reason why I say that, in that same wheelhouse study, it showed a huge variance of Pell take rates. And so, there was no correlation between North and South, urban or rural, or, demographics or anything like that. And so certainly within that data set, you could probably identify colleges that have high Pell take rates and identify where, they are on each of these policies. And there's several others that we could be examining as well.
Hi, I actually used to work in exactly this in community college in financial aid, so this presentation spoke directly to me. Thank you. My question is, what barriers you were able to discover are the most common for why that 20% of students aren't getting there?
And that, the barriers, there are a number of barriers, the ones that I just mentioned, and then there are a few others. To what extent, is income verification procedures more of a barrier than SAP policies? Because those policies and procedures are up to each college, it probably varies significantly across each college and district. And so I should say district. And so the idea behind this report, and I should have said, is actually targeted towards college leadership, is to have college leadership just really think about each of these policies and how they would impact their students. Every policy is going to look very different. And so, it's hard to say which of these would be more of a barrier.
Do you have any data or like a number about how many sanctions Department of Education has actually conducted against community colleges? Like, I'm wondering if that actually happened or it's something that they're just kind of afraid of moving under their head.
So there's two forms of sanctions. There's the college owes the Department of Education money that is deemed fraudulent. So that's the individual award. And then there's being the nuclear bomb sanction is being ruled, your students being ruled ineligible for to Title IV or financial aid in general. That has not happened so the nuclear bomb has not happened to a California community college. As far as, that's an interesting question to identify to what extent have colleges had to pay back, to what is the real problem that we're talking about here. So the answer is no, but that's an interesting question.
So I used to work in fraud prevention and unemployment. And in those kinds of cases, we used to see an uptick during recession, right? There's something to that with fraud in this program. Is there any seasonality to it or recurring pattern?
Just not relating to financial aid, but we have seen an uptick. There's been a lot of emergency funds, speaking about the COVID, class, there's been a number of emergency funds that are available to students, and we have seen an uptick in fraudulent applications for that emergency fraud. I want to make it very clear, we're not just, opening up the cash box and like throwing it out the window here. The colleges absolutely need to be responsible for protecting taxpayer dollars. However, there's a lot of flexibility contained within federal law where combined with these new incentives that I've been speaking about, the new funding formula, new goals set by the legislature, there's an opportunity to really think harder about, is this policy help protecting the college to the extent of unnecessarily denying students their financial aid? And again, that's a question each college is going to have to answer for itself.
In that vein, I think one of the things I'm interested in about students who, have barriers, like, for instance, they belong to the field of plus, community, they're in a household where they've been ostracized, or, their family's not willing to kick them out, not willing to help them. They're trying to go back to college. They are not eligible for a Pell Grant or a Pell Grant because of their current income. Did you find information on, are there any community colleges that are trying to use for that particular type of students or facing the same barrier?
Yeah, so within income verification, a college has discretion on how they verify a student's or their parents' income. And so one thing you sort of mentioned for marginalized students, for students who do not have a relationship with their families, it's very hard for them to demonstrate that they're not being supported by their family if their family is not willing to turn over, their documents. And so colleges do have the authority, for example, to work with that student to identify ways to demonstrate that student is indeed eligible for financial aid. And that's just one of many examples.